I get a lot of questions, especially throughout the years, about slavery in the Bible, in the Jewish Bible, the Hebrew Bible. We see slavery all over the place in Exodus chapter 21 and other places. We see slavery all over the Jewish Bible. Now, let me clarify this because this is a very, very important subject. An atheist will jump all over this, and understandably, especially when you don't understand what we're dealing with here. Now, first, what I always tell people is that you have to take your 21st century mindset out the door, out the window. This is not the 21st century. We're dealing with over 3,000 years ago, especially the time of the Torah. In the ancient world and in the Torah, when we're dealing with the word slaves, now it's the same terminology when translated in English as slaves. We are not talking about slaves as in slaves of the South of the 1800s, or the book like Huckleberry Finn, or any of these stories that you hear of where these slaves are trying to run away from their slave masters and they were treated as if they were not even human. These were sinful acts. This is a sin. That kind of slavery is a sin and an abomination. They were subhuman. They had no rights. They were trying to escape their masters. Now, in the Hebrew Bible, in the Torah, when it speaks about slaves, Eved, in Hebrew, slaves in the Hebrew Bible, in Torah, it's speaking about, remember this is over 3,400 years ago. We're saying the same word, we mean two totally different things. In the ancient world, there was no CPS. There was no government help for homeless. There was no government help for single mothers. There was no police departments and sheriffs and all the help that we have now in the 21st century. We can go where we need to go to get the help that we need if we're on our own. In the ancient world, there was no help like we have today. Sure, there were soldiers, but if you living in the ancient world, especially at that time, you were a single mother or on your own, a wanderer, you were as good as dead. You could have been raped, killed, pillaged, everything removed. You were as good as dead, male or female. So in the ancient world, when you're seeing in the Torah slaves among you, these are people in the ancient world who would join themselves to the Israelites, become part of the family, even though they were not blood related. They would attach themselves to the Israelites and become part of the family by working and being with them and even being able to marry among the Israelites and given rights. For example, in Jewish law and even in the Talmud as well, it says if you had a slave at that time and there was only one pillow in the house, the master or the people of the household did not get that pillow. The Eved got it. The slave got the pillow. Everything, if you had only one thing, the benefits, the people that joined themselves to Israelites that were deemed as slaves in Torah, they got the benefits. You were not first runner-up. The Eved got it. The slave got it. They had first dibs on things when it came to the last of anything in the household. So we have the same word, slaves, Eved, but we're meaning two totally different things. In the ancient world, if you did not have a clan or a family to join yourselves to, you were as good as dead. So people would join themselves to a family, to the Israelites, to reap the benefits of the security, the benefits, the rights, able to get married and be secure and have security with the family. And that's what we're dealing with here. There's also another terminology. What is a Hebrew slave? According to tradition, as well as the Torah, a Hebrew slave was a different sort of slave. Remember, the same terminology, we mean something totally different. This is very important for atheists and those who are shaken up by passages like this. It's good that we understand what we're dealing with here. In the ancient world, in the Torah, when it speaks about Hebrew slaves, a Hebrew slave is a person who stole from the Israelites, or anyone of the tribes of Israel who stole or who violated their rights or stole some of their property or did something wrong to the Israelites, they would have to live and work off that debt or that sin. They would have to work it out by working for the family to pay it off, and then they'd be released. So in the Torah, it talks about you're only allowed, if you have these servants or slaves, Hebrew slaves or vice versa, you're only allowed to have them for up to 5 years, for example. And there's different rules. It has to be read in context for you to understand. There are consequences for certain things that were dealt with. You had to treat them as if they were part of the family. So again, this is not slavery of the South. This is not the slavery of Alabama or Mississippi. We're saying the same terminology but mean totally different things. In the slavery of the South, the slaves were considered anti-human. They were not even human. They had no rights. They were subhuman considered by their masters. They would flee from their masters, run away. And this is an abomination to God. God hated this. This is an abomination. This is a sin. That sort of slavery terminology is a huge sin to God. And it's disgusting. That is not what we're dealing with here in the Torah. So I want to get that very, very clear. In the ancient world, we didn't have welfare. In the ancient world, we didn't have food stamps. We didn't have government help. We didn't have homeless shelters. None of that. If you were on your own, you were as good as dead. If you lost your family member in a death, a woman lost her husband, and she was by herself, she was as good as dead. Somebody could have raped her. We're dealing with over 3,000 years ago. So we have to take our 21st century mind and throw it out when we're dealing with the Torah. We must bring ourselves to remembering that this is the ancient world a long time ago. And we have the same terminology, but we mean totally, totally different circumstances and situations. So I hope that I can clarify this in your mind and you look deeper into this. I just want to make that very clear because this is a very important subject, very controversial, and very much one of the top 10 things that will be attacked in our Torah, which if we don't know our Torah or Jewish history or Israelite history, we won't be able to give good answers. But once you understand these things, you can understand and be able to explain things a lot better. So one side, we have the slaves of the South, a sinful, sinful slavery where they were beaten, killed, lynched. They were not allowed to have freedoms. They didn't have any rights. They were subhuman. And we have them running away from their masters, trying to flee from them. And then we have the Torah, where the people, the slaves there are saying, I don't want to go anywhere. I love my master. I love my family. I want to be here. I want to get married. I want to stay with them. So we have the same terminology, slavery, slaves, servants, Eved. For example, in the Torah, Abraham has an Eved, Eliezer. And God says, I will make a great nation out of you. And Abraham says, you must mean my Eved, my slave, Eliezer. Now, why would Abraham say that if we're talking about the slaves of the South? Same word, two totally different meanings. You must mean my slave, Eliezer. He's going to be the great nation. Because he's very old, right? He says, no, I'm not going to choose him. I'm going to choose you. Same word, totally different situation. Shalom. I hope this video was helpful. God bless.